To the Point with Kelly Dunn and Michael Williams.
He wraps his first term in Congress this year and will make his bid for a second in a new district. That, some say, is a tactical and political retreat to safer ground. He's also been called a darling of the Tea Party, certainly is one of the highest profile Republican freshmen on Capitol Hill, though he has gone his way on some major votes. Welcome to the Point. I'm Michael Williams. Kelly Dunn is off this Sunday. Our guest this week, Congressman Allen West. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Your first term, you've represented the constituents of the 22nd. Now, as a Republican, you're moving to the 18th. You're a 22-year Army vet, a chest full of medals. You've seen combat duty, your combat experience. You don't back up from anything. Some have said, well, he's backing up a bit here. He's making a political retreat from the 22nd, which covered Palm Beach County and bits of Broward. Now, more of the center of your district will be along the Treasure Coast. You'll have a Port St. Lucie office there, and you'll have a more favorable political demographic with more GOP voters there. Is it a political and tactical retreat to the 18th?
Well, first and foremost, being a military professional, if you see an ambush, you don't walk into it. So we had a D+1 district that we won in CD 22, and for whatever reason.
In plain English, what did it mean?
Plain English, that means you have a 1% registered advantage of Democrats over Republicans.
In the 22nd.
In the 22nd. Now, for whatever.
All this is redistricting's going on.
Now, redistricting is going on, and the folks up in Tallahassee, for whatever reason, decided to take away Republican precincts, put in Democrat precincts, so it goes from a D1 to a D+6. That means it's a 57% Democrat district. Now, the district we're running in, CD 18, has about 25% of our current district folds over into that, and it's only an R+1, so you have 1% registered advantage of Republicans over Democrats. So I don't think that this whole thing about he's running away to a very favorable Republican district is true. I went from a swing district to a swing district, and I think that once again you have to get out there and show your principles, your perspectives, your insights, and win people over to get their confidence.
Why move if it is swing district to swing district? Because there is enough of a political change in terms of the demographic that it might make the difference?
It's once again a clear, fair district to run in, as opposed to a district that has, been now redrawn to be favorable for a Democrat.
Congressman Democrat Patrick Murphy says he'll follow you to the 18th. If he gets that far, would want to challenge you in the fall. Martin County Sheriff and Republican Robert Crowder is already in. He has said, listen, people on the Treasure Coast need somebody who have deep roots there, have long experience there. And he says, I, Sheriff Crowder, who will be retiring before the year is out, am that guy. The implicit message is that Allen West is not. I heard some say he's a political carpetbagger, and you responded, you're not a carpetbagger, but a
duffel bagger.
But how do you, and after 22 years in the Army, you pack that duffel bag a lot, but how do you answer his argument that he understands the needs in the Treasure Coast better because he's of and from the Treasure Coast?
Well, let me tell you very simply, and this is what I would say. The Treasure Coast has a high unemployment rate. That's a national issue. The Treasure Coast has a high foreclosure rate. That's a national issue. The Treasure Coast has small businesses that are closing up. I sit on the Small Business Committee. That's a national issue. The Treasure Coast has high gas prices. That's a national issue when you talk about energy policy at a national level. So I think that I'm well qualified to go up there and do what I've always done my entire life. Go wherever this country asks me to go to serve its people, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Congressman, you're one of 535 people, House and Senate. Have you been able to affect any real change? You are a powerful voice as a freshman Republican, but one voice. Have you been stymied, frustrated by the real change you've been able to affect? All the issues you talked about are still with us. Foreclosure problems, the high gas prices, a huge debate in this country about energy policy. We'll get to entitlements and other issues in just a moment. But do you think you've really been able to make a difference in your first 2 years?
Well, I would say that in the first year up there, we passed the budget. The Senate didn't.
Just happened to have that.
I always carry this with me. Here are 27 pieces of legislation.
Hold that up. We may be able to get a close-up. Yeah.
Those are 27 pieces of legislation that are sitting on Harry Reid's desk. Good policy that we've been able to pass. And so I'm very proud of what we've been able to do. Now the question is to Harry Reid, what are you going to do for this policy? And the 6 points, that's our jobs objectives that we want to have for this great nation.
And you've argued as Republicans that on revamped tax policy, on energy policy, you've been stymied, so you've not accomplished as much as you'd like off this list from the Republican point of view.
Absolutely. But the thing is that it takes quite a while to turn an aircraft carrier, but at least I think we started that motion.
Congressman West, national debt, of course, that really in many ways helped drive you into office, and yet we're looking at another $1 trillion plus deficit this year. But with the hyperbole on the debt, can we really achieve much? Former West Palm Beach Mayor Lois Frankel, a Democrat who you prospectively would have run against in the 22nd, has recently expressed her, quote, horror at a plan to end Medicare as we know it, her campaign's words, talking about the Ryan plan.
Yeah.
Hyperbole, Republicans argue, a scare tactic. You were quoted recently on the House floor during Black History Month in a speech of accusing Democrats of supporting a, quote, insidious form of slavery because of Democratic support for entitlement reforms. Is it too much?
Not entitlement reform. What I'm talking
about...
Entitlement
programs, excuse me.
But not just Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the mandatory spending programs. What I'm talking about is economic freedom versus economic dependency.
Pretty strong language, though. I mean, Republicans get mortgage relief.
But see, this is what I believe in. I believe in the safety net. But the safety net is now becoming a hammock, and that's not the American way. Now, let's talk about this whole thing about ending Medicare. In 2011, the #1 political lie coming from PolitiFact, which is right over there in St. Petersburg, was the Democrats saying that Republicans want to end Medicare as we know it. This is the truth, Michael, and this is what the American people need to understand. The actuaries of Social Security and Medicare testified to the House Energy and Commerce Committee last year. You got 8 years, 9 years at the most before Medicare goes bankrupt. After that, 5 or 6 years, you're going to see a degradation of benefits by about 25 to 30% of Social Security. That's another reason why you saw this payroll tax cut thing. It's nothing but defunding Social Security. So we have things that are coming out of Washington, D.C. that are really counter to us protecting and preserving the mandatory spending programs such as Medicare and Social Security.
Are we ever with the hyperbole I just described? Some say what you said was hyperbole, certainly some say what
I said is fact.
Well, insidious form of slavery. Some
it is
said
an insidious form of slavery.
So you stand by that?
Absolutely. When I go to my neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, which was once a very strong and vibrant black community, the same community that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was brought up in, Sweet Auburn Avenue with all the great black businesses that are there, it's a shell of itself, because we have made people more dependent instead of creating the opportunities in the inner city and all across this country.
The follow-up question this would be, are we going to get remotely close to a balanced budget ever in this country with A, the hyperbole, B, many economists argue, look, at the end of the day, all Americans are going to have to look at tax increases for generations now. We haven't wanted to pay more taxes. Politicians haven't wanted to say to us, you're going to have to pay more taxes if you want everything you want, and you're going to have to look at entitlement reform, means testing for Social Security, for Medicare, raising the age limit, which is happening, but some say needs to happen more quickly. Do you agree that ultimately we need a combination of both?
This is what I have to tell you. In fiscal year 2011, you had about a 6.5% increase in revenues in the United States of America, but you still ran a $1.3 trillion deficit. I am not going to look at you in the face and ask you to give me more money in Washington, D.C. until we get our fiscal house in order in Washington, D.C. And that's the most important thing.
Does that mean means testing for Social Security? Does that mean the Ryan plan, where you'd look at more of private vouchers in the future, not for Medicare retirees now or near term, but down the road? Does it mean those kind of changes?
It will not be there for me if we don't have some type of reforms to that program. The premium support plan that Paul Ryan put out is a very viable option for Medicare as we go forward.
National politics now, are you part of the Mitt Romney wing, the Rick Santorum wing, or the Newt Gingrich wing?
I'm just
Ron Paul I'll throw in there. I think I know the answer, but who do you support?
I am not endorsing or supporting any specific candidate. Whoever is the eventual nominee will get my 110% support. I support the American people.
Do you worry, as some analysts argue, that the Republicans are hurting themselves in November by a very long, very contentious, very drawn-out battle in this GOP season?
Well, I think that there's a short-term memory thing going on, because in 2008, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama went deep into June. So I don't think we need the media to try to create some type of paranoia and panic.
Democrats say Republicans are handing them a wedge on women's issues. Rick Santorum made comments that he personally opposed contraceptive coverage and health insurance. There was the Rush Limbaugh comment about a young woman who went to testify on Capitol Hill. First of all, what do you say about that Rush Limbaugh comment, which included sexually degrading language?
Well, I would say the exact same thing that everyone should say to Bill Maher, which no one says. As a matter of fact,
what should they have said in your mind to Bill Maher?
I mean,
first to Rush Limbaugh.
It's already been apologized for, but this is the most important thing.
Was it wrong for Limbaugh to do that?
Let's get back on the issue. This is the issue.
But
the intrusive nature of government is the issue.
I do want to give you a chance. Was it wrong for Rush Limbaugh to say that?
That is not
to use sexually degrading language.
Of course it's wrong, but it's wrong for anyone. And so why would Bill Maher be given $1 million to the Barack Obama super PAC and the things that he has said? Think about the things that, what's his name on TV? Letterman has said.
Let me ask you this. Do Republicans win if it's a social issues debate, or do they have to keep it, as Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum also has argued this, we've got to keep it on economic policy? How do they win in November, and do they lose if it becomes a social issue debate?
I think you got to keep it on constitutional policy. When you talk about the free exercise of religion, and also talk about the intrusive nature of government. When government is telling the individual American citizen what type of private sector commodity they must buy. When you're telling corporations and religious organizations what they must provide that goes against, counter to their principles and beliefs. That's an intrusive nature of government.
Congressman, I want to turn overseas just briefly. A U.S. soldier shoots and kills 16 Afghan civilians, women and children included. There's been an outcry and violence against U.S. troops for the recent burning of Qurans. Is the mission now fatally flawed in Afghanistan? Is it time to come home before the 2014 deadline, in your opinion?
I think that we are losing the moral high ground. When we are starting to make ourselves somewhat subservient. First of all, this gentleman that did that horrific action down in Panjwai district, which I've been through in my time that I was there, that's right in the middle of Taliban Central. We're not going to turn over an American soldier to the Afghan people for any type of trial. We have a uniform code of military justice. What we do need to do is we need to reevaluate what are our operational goals and objectives in Afghanistan. You cannot do anything as far as securing Afghanistan until you deal with the sanctuaries in Pakistan. If we don't want to deal with the sanctuaries in Pakistan, then we need to get out of Afghanistan.
As we stand there now, is it a failed mission?
I wouldn't say it's a failed mission, because when I was there and you see the children that are able to go to school, I was there from 2005 to 2007, and the abilities that women now have to be in the military, to be in the police force, it's not a failed mission, but the window of opportunity for having true success may be closing.
Last 30 seconds, I'd like to give you a chance to the new constituents of the 18th, your message why you should be reelected this fall.
My message is just the same as being there in the CD22. I work hard and I give all of my efforts to you. It's the exact same thing I've done as far as my service and commitment to this country.
Republican Allen West, Congressman from the 22nd, now running in the 18th. We thank you so much for joining us on To The Point. Another big week on the Republican primary calendar. We're breaking down those results from Alabama and Mississippi, plus where the campaign goes from here. Our roundtable weighs in next. Reaction to Allen West comments. And is it time for Newt Gingrich to give up his bid for the White House? Our roundtable weighs in next. Now for our roundtable with News Channel 5 political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Dr. Robert Watson, and Brian Crowley, author of the Crowley Political Report. Gentlemen, as always, thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
Brian, we'll begin with you. Allen West had a lot to say. The highs, lows, your thoughts, your reaction.
Well, I think he's working real hard at trying to justify suddenly jumping from Broward County to the Treasure Coast for his new congressional district, effectively shoving Congressman Rooney out of that district. He's trying to say that, you know, there's all these national issues, gas prices, unemployment, and everything, and I'll be fighting for those issues for the folks in the Treasure Coast as well. I think it's a tough sell for him to explain his reasoning for moving. We all know his real reason for moving is self-preservation. He doesn't think he can win the district he's in now. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that, but I think he's going to have to I think he's going to have a tough time selling that to the folks in the Treasure Coast.
Briefly, before we move on, does it make the 22nd a shoe-in for the Democrat, Lois Frankel?
No, not at all. I mean, you know, Adam Hasner, who recently got endorsements from Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, if their endorsements translate into them raising some money for him, they'll at the very least make it a competitive race. I mean, after all, a Republican won that district, and even though it's a little more Democrat this time, it's certainly not impossible for a Republican to win that district.
And Hasner received some Democratic support when he was in the state legislature. He's a good fundraiser, a very good campaigner. That's going to be a barn burner of a race there.
National politics, Allen West talked about, and I asked him about, and he talked about social issues, women's issues, which have been in such news. Democrats think Republicans are digging themselves a hole. Do you agree or disagree? And what about the comment that if you're going to condemn people like Rush Limbaugh, you need to condemn people like Bill Maher, who made sexually derogatory comments about Sarah Palin at one point, and yet's giving money to a PAC that supports President Obama?
Well, they're digging a big hole, and Allen West has a shovel. He's contributing to it. The Republicans have to get off this divisive, beating the drum for certain social issues that only appeal to the most radical right wing of the population. They got to get back to talking about jobs, gas prices, housing issues. They've got to get back to those economic issues. That's where this election will be won or lost. Allen West, I agreed with Brian. I don't think he made a good pitch for why he jumped ship. He likes military analogies. He said he was ambushed down there, but he forgot to say it's his own party then that would have ambushed him. And if he is a star in the party, why did the party quote-unquote ambush him? I think the other military analogy is cut and run. Although it doesn't hurt him in his fundraising, Allen West is raising a lot of money. One of the top fundraisers in the country.
Is he going to be, bottom line, very hard to beat in the 18th for that very reason?
I think he'll always be hard to beat because he's raising so much money. Though? I wouldn't say impossible. No, it's a new district. It's an electorate that doesn't know him as well. He is a carpetbagger. It's hard to make that sale. But he has the money, and he'll out fundraise both of his opponents, the Republican and the Democrat.
Briefly to my question, because it's still out there. You saw it on CNN the other day. The debate about the Limbaugh comment on a young woman who appears on Capitol Hill to talk about issues involving contraception and health insurance coverage. And everybody's saying, well, wait a minute, if we're going to condemn that, then Democrats make sure you condemn people like Bill Maher, the name's been brought up, who's made derogatory comments as well, Sarah Palin comments he made, and saying, wait a minute, if you're going to take money from him, then what's the difference here?
Well, I agree. I think both Bill Maher and Rush Limbaugh have gone way over the line in the kind of way that they have described women and in other remarks that they've made about things. I mean, you know, it's funny. I was having this conversation with somebody about the other day about Rush Limbaugh, and I said, had I been his media handler, and I suspect Rush Limbaugh is well beyond anybody handling him, I would have said to him, call the young lady up and apologize. In a 30-second conversation, he probably could have ended the whole discussion. And his apologies that he made over a period of 2 days, I don't think would have been as effective as a very quick phone call to her. But yeah, the dialogue has gotten far too coarse.
On all sides. Let's move on to...
May I make a quick comment, Michael?
Of course.
You know, I think one of the biggest issues facing our country today is this incivility. Fear has replaced fact, and paranoia has replaced dialogue. And it's hard to get anything done, whether it's jobs or reducing the debt, if we're not even talking to one another. We have all this incendiary rhetoric. Whether it's Rush Limbaugh or Beck on the right, or whether it's Ed Schultz or locally Randy Rhodes on the left, none of it's acceptable. But people like Allen West, political leaders, have to start standing up and leading by calling these folks out. And we're beginning to see, I think the story has legs. What we're beginning to see right now is that thousands and thousands of people have gone online into social media and are boycotting advertisers that advertise with the Limbaugh program. So in the marketplace of ideas and radio, people are putting their money, you know, behind it by saying we're not buying any product. And this story could have legs. This could move into the election cycle further.
Briefly, another story that's going to have legs. You saw Allen West hold up his list of what he says are Republican achievements. The Supreme Court this spring set to hear arguments about the individual mandate. Republicans, of course, want the entire Health Care Act repealed. Hasn't been on the radar a lot, but it is now. How much is it going to play into decisions made this fall? And, of course, the Supreme Court decision about whether or not to repeal that individual mandate, or whether, I should say, more precisely, judging the constitutionality of it, it's going to be huge. Your reaction to how that'll frame the debate in the fall. First you, then Brian.
Sure. Well, I think if it's overturned, that's going to give fuel for the Republicans, and that's going to become a major issue during the campaign. You're going to see ads about Obama's signature, quote-unquote, piece of legislation was unconstitutional. If it passes constitutional muster, I don't think it will be as much of an issue. But, you know, during an already intense election year, such a divisive issue like health care, it's just going to put it front and center.
Well, I have to disagree with Robert a little bit on that, because I think no matter which direction the court goes on that, the Republicans are going to try to make a lot of noise about it. Obviously, if they overturn it, it will be a huge issue for the Republicans. But I think if the court upholds it, it will be a huge issue for Republicans. I think that they'll shift away from the constitutional argument and just continue on the pace and says this is wrong and it hurts the economy and it hurts individuals.
Presidential politics. Rick Santorum still making headway. Alabama and Mississippi now in his column. Newt Gingrich had a bad night last week. Hope to do better in the Deep South. A lot are asking, should Newt Gingrich drop out to make this a two-man race? Santorum, Romney, and give clarity to the GOP race. Do you think he will? Do you think he should?
No, he shouldn't. And the reason I say that is that more and more people are saying that this is going to turn out to be a race that's decided at the convention. He's going to have a significant block of delegates as they go to the convention, and there's no reason for him to drop out before the convention.
In another week, we're going to Louisiana. Mitt Romney took 6% of Louisiana and got third place back in 2008. He's not going to do well in Louisiana. Large Catholic electorate, conservative electorate, Gingrich and Santorum are going to do well in a week in Louisiana.
Rapid roundtable, a lot to cover. As always, you both do it concisely. We appreciate it. A parting thought from both of our guests. Coming up, please stay with us. Now time for our Watson Wrap and the Crowley Closer. Dr. Watson?
Well, the High Court threw out the Senate's version of gerrymandering, redistricting, so the legislature was called back this past week for a whopping 11-minute session at the cost of taxpayers of thousands and thousands of dollars. Probably the most expensive 11 political minutes we'll see this year.
Political tug-of-war in Florida, Brian?
Well, on Tuesday, we had the big Illinois primary. If Rick Santorum wins that primary, it's going to be really bad news for Mitt Romney. But Mitt Romney, even if he wins, I think he needs to win big in order to tell people that Rick Santorum's not as strong as some people think he is at this point. As a side note, on Thursday, Friday, we started getting news reports that Allen West would seriously consider becoming the running mate should his name be called.
The political drama goes on and on. He'll be back on the broadcast.
Yep.
And we always have you two back. Always a pleasure. Thank you always for your insights. And as always, we thank you for taking part of your day to spend with us on To The Point. And if you'd like to send us a comment about today's broadcast, go to WPTV.com and click on the political link. Enjoy the rest of your day.